GTO is not the true optimal way of doing things. At least as far as I'm concerned. I have a pretty good record of playing poker. Let's start with GTO. GTO is a balance of opposites. So it's a balance between aggression, lack of aggression, also of folding or not folding so much. And you can see all these ideas are related. And if both players exploit each other, they lead to GTO. Perfectly exploit each other anyway. Now, people don't start off anywhere near GTO in all kinds of situations. It's very hard to. And with enough experience or the right data, you can have population reads on how people play. All of my experience in poker, I've tended to find that people fall into the four different kinds of players are basically the normal recreational players, the not normal recreational players, like the crazy ones. They're usually very crazy and bluff too much. The other ones tend to bluff too little and they're too passive. These are the majority of players. And there's also the normal pros and the not normal pros, the crazy pros. And they have the same tendencies reflected, but now they kind of know what they're doing and have some basics behind their belt. My general play, at least from the start, goes into exploiting these two subsets as much as I can until I see more information that tells me a bit about like how precisely they play, in which case I adjust my view and I adjust my way of exploiting them and I tailor it to what these players do. And you can get lots of clues from how they talk or how they dress or what sort of person they are of where they're going to lay on these within these categories. You can get quite some hints very fast at the style of people play. So I'd go from population exploits or exploiting populationally to exploiting specifically. And if I discovered that they were exploiting me back and leaning more towards balanced, and I realized, okay, I had to counter exploit them or whatever it was, and they counter exploited me, etc. Then I would get to GTO, which is the game theory optimal. And that's where you kind of don't want to be if we're talking about gaining value, because both of you guys are playing perfectly and no one is winning. So I would not start at GTO. I would have to eventually play it if I saw they're playing good enough. You know what? I had this idea of like the perfect play in poker, but I thought to myself, why only just have the perfect play in poker? There's better and better ways of doing things in life. Why not live a better and better life? Why not have a better and better experience? How do I find this better way of living life? This was a bit of a deep thought process, a deep rabbit hole of sorts. And I started to think, even within poker, there are plays of sorts you can make or things you can do. I would just say things you can do, where you can create better situations for yourself within poker. This really was the key to my success, I would say, was I tried to open many doors as possible so that I would have many different outlets for success. And this is one thing I advocate for you guys, is to look for better opportunities rather than trying to become better and better and better and better and better, for which there are diminishing returns. So I would do things such as find other games, try to tailor my behavior so that I would be invited to more games, and I would be liked a bit more. I would also try to do people favors, that kind of things. And these seemed like different actions to take to better oneself. And also, I mean, I had an underlying conscience, of course. I always imagined myself to be a good person and had the underlying goodness. But at some point, these two extremes of goodness have rectified themselves or consolidated. And I saw they were actually quite more aligned than they appeared. Goodness and utility, that is. And I started to see that the rational thing to do in terms of optimizing my own utility and what was good just from my own inner consciousness very much aligned. And it curiously represented something I had been reading about in history or learned of in history through the various religions and ancient philosophies, or that I would later discover in these ancient philosophies, such as in the case of Aristotle's golden mean, which represented the balance between various extremes. But there were other examples of that in history, such as Buddha's middle path and what I saw what Christ preached, which was essentially an outline towards the optimal way of being for a person. I saw that all the ways of his being, or at least most of them, I didn't see that all of them were, seemed to more and more show up as the better and better ways of doing things, just period. Not even in the sense of whether there was a morality or not. And they seem to have the summation principle of do to others as you would to yourselves, that being the golden rule, of course. And even before Christ, there was a character that you guys may not know of named Krishna in the Mahabharata, which is the Hindu holy text, who preached something very similar, although he didn't do it so actively as Christ did, more like live his life this way as a prince and guiding his people and the heroes that he was supporting towards a better and better path through essentially the same sort of philosophy. Incidentally, he predated all those guys. It's hard to know if he existed or not, but he also said basically the same thing as what Aristotle said, which is the golden rule, meaning follow the balance of the extremes to the point where now you're making the optimal decision to get the most out of life. Now, I suspect that there may be a quote-unquote exploitative strategy, at least to doing good, that may exist in the randomness. I started to see a possibility for this as I contemplated the events that happened to me. And in history, it's been suggested that there are subtle events in randomness that have guided humanity towards a better and better way over time, such as actually the coming of Christ and the coming of the Buddha, who came as a consequence of the caste system being one of the greatest evils that ever existed. And in the Mahabharata, God actually says that he is gambling. Within this randomness, perhaps a hidden hand guiding things. I started to wonder, is it possible that God was guiding randomness so that it played an exploitative strategy on humanity to make a greater and greater positive change? I don't know if this exists or not. It's hard to say. And of course, let me know what you guys think. Do you think there's a hidden hand of God in the randomness guiding humanity? And leave your feedback on this video. Let me know what you guys think. If you want to hear more poker stuff or more of this mystical stuff, let me know.